Good morning. My name is John Bourdeaux. I am a lover of the sacrament of baptism and the cries of children in church. I have always thought that they are the most perfect prayer. I'm a follower of Christ. I am relentlessly optimistic. I'm a destination guy who is learning to enjoy the journey. And I'm forgiven by the amazing grace of God. A few weeks ago here in church during the summer when we were having the hymn sing and Steve was running around getting people's favorite hymn numbers, we had a selection of Amazing Grace. And he reminded me that there are two ways to sing that first verse. I've always sort of wondered about it. What happened to the old one? Why do we sing the new one? So once we've heard about the Amazing Grace and how sweet its sound is, we can decide. Steve offered us an option. Did God's amazing grace save a wretch like me? Or did God's amazing grace save and set me free? When I hear that first one, the wretch like me, I confess that I identify with that. Some days I think that God's grace, His mercy, are the only things that are keeping my eyes from being permanently affixed to the tops of my shoes. When I hear that second one, saved and set me free, I also identify with that one. Some days I feel like God has lifted me up and released me like a bird taking to flight. So I wonder, what's the difference between those two feelings? I'm the same person. Why do I feel sometimes wretched and sometimes like I'm soaring? Put another way, for me, why do I sometimes feel worthy of God's love and compassion and forgiveness and mercy, and sometimes I don't? In my faith journey, I've come to an understanding that the difference between these two times, these two different I ams, is whether or not I have availed myself of God's grace using the tools that He's laid at my feet. Have I given freely of myself, of my time, my resources, money, my effort? Have I sought God with all of my heart and my soul? Have I engaged in prayer? Have I prayed for my loved ones? Have I tried to love unloved ones? Let me give you an example. This past week, we marked the anniversary, so to speak, of the 9/11 attacks. I have a high school classmate who died on that day. His name was Todd Pittman. He worked at Cantor Fitzgerald. I think of him from time to time. I think of his family, his sister, who's a friend of mine. And when I got in the car on Wednesday morning, I looked down at the clock and it was 8:46 in the morning, at that time when this whole tragedy began. I wasn't planning on marking the moment, it just marked me. I closed my eyes and I prayed for Todd. I prayed for his sister, his mom and dad. I prayed for the first responders who went into that building probably knowing that they would never see the blue sky again. I prayed for the folks that were affected, and I felt sad, I felt angry, I felt helpless, I felt wretched. Then in that moment, it also occurred to me, God calls on us to pray for those that we don't want to pray for, my enemies, those that would seek to do us harm. I gritted my teeth, I mustered some strength. I prayed for the terrorists who piloted the planes into those buildings. I prayed for their families. I prayed for the people that would do us harm. I want to be clear, it wasn't a really great prayer. It was one of those, God, with those people thy will be done ones. But something did happen. In that instant, I felt relief. I felt relieved of the helplessness, the sadness, and the anger. I felt the presence of God with me in that moment. And I felt saved. And I felt set free. So from 8:46 to 8:48 on Wednesday morning, sitting in the front seat of my car outside my house, a wretch like me was saved and set free. When I was thinking about giving this talk this morning, I sat at my desk at home trying to figure out how to fit all those words into the first verse of Amazing Grace. They didn't scan, and it turns out I'm not qualified to rewrite Amazing Grace. So I got smart. I gave up. I realized that I couldn't do it. But I also realized that God can, and He does every single time that I ask.